let me put a little lead in on this, Lawarence, and then we'll go into our little program. This is George Dingledy with the Wabash Carnegie Public Library Oral History Program, interviewing Lawarence Gaunt, 499 Bristol Drive, Wabash, Indiana, Wednesday afternoon, July 27th, 1977. Now, Lawarence, it's always better if we start off if you tell me about your own family first, and that's, in other words, your parents and where you were born. Let's start where you were born and when you were born, who your parents were.
Well, I was born in 1903, and my people had all lived around Wabash.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I became 21 years of old, I had been in the construction business for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
I decided I wanted to go to Florida and work down there. So I went to Florida, and I know I had my 21st birthday on the way down. That was 1924.
Mm-hmm.
And so I worked down there all year, and then came back here, and I ran a contracting business here in Wabash. My father and I were in business together.
Uh-huh.
We figured on several schoolhouses around here, and always usually came in about second on most of them. Never did. And I'll never forget the time one building I figured out here was the Westward School. I had the second bid on it.
Uh-huh.
But I never got to build a schoolhouse until Linlon came along over there. I put that addition on over there. And I've been in the construction company for quite a while. And along came the CC camps.
Uh-huh.
Well, Mr. Harrelson was sent in here from over in Columbus, Fifth Corps area.
Mm-hmm.
So he contacted me on the phone and wanted to know if I'd be interested in helping build this CC camp up at Lake Grove. And I said, well, I have a little work that I'd have to get straightened around. He says, well, I think we can handle that all right. Mm-hmm. So I met him down at the hotel, and I ended up taking the job of building the camp for him up there, mm-hmm. and working as just on an hour base. Well, we got started, and that was back in the days when we just went in on the bare land up there and started from scratch, putting those foundations in, and not much of a survey to work from, so we started building those buildings. In those days it was a little bit different. We did not have any CC boys around. It was all hired labor. So we had bricklayers. Wasn't much brick on them. It was mostly carpenters. We had 35 carpenters working there, but in the mess hall we had to have some chimneys built and some things like that, so we did have a few bricklayers, but a few common laborers, but most of them were carpenters because that was the biggest part of it. Mm-hmm. And I can remember very plainly that they hauled the material out on this job with horses. We did not. It wasn't. This was a little bit before the truck age came along. So we worked on that camp, and we got it done in pretty good time. And I know the camp at Bluffton. There was another camp, CC camp at Bluffton, that was built at the same time ours was. So we finished up a little bit ahead of them, and which I thought was a pretty good record. And so I had gone home and started my contracting business up again. And then I got another call from the Fifth Corps area. Wanted to know if I would go to West Virginia for them. They had all the money spent on the camp that they had appropriated to build the camp with. And they was in trouble over there, and wanted me to go over and see what was the matter and see if I could finish up that camp for them. Well, I told them I could go in 2 weeks, which I did. But at that time, they did not know where the camp was. They had to find this camp. And that was some ordeal in those days, because our communications weren't quite what they were in our days. So I remember I went into Clarksburg, West Virginia, and they was putting up a camp there. So I helped them lay it out and get it all laid out. And then by that time I got my orders to move on over to Elkins, West Virginia. I had 5 mountain ranges to go over out of Elkins. Back in the sticks. There wasn't much traffic on the road. No pavement in those days. We had to just go over the gravel roads. We finally found this camp way back in. And it was a place where you didn't ask any questions. Mm-hmm. Because there was a lot of stills back in the mountains, and if you saw anything going little different than what she thought was, but you didn't ask any questions about it. You just went on about your business back there. And I'll never forget the day I walked in on the job. I went down to the captain. I said to him, I said, where can I hire some carpenters around here? They only had about 2, and they didn't have any money to pay them with, or just a little bit. They were trying to get some of these barracks buildings fixed up so they could move some of the boys in. They had to live in tents and things like that, but he was saving back, and he'd gotten rid of all these carpenters there because he didn't have enough money to finish it on. Well, I went in there and took a survey of what had gone on. I soon found out what was wrong. They'd sent a portable plans in there to build a conventional type buildings. So, my goodness, the waste of material. They wasted a lot of material, and you can just imagine they'd make those panels and send them in. That was what it was supposed to. They got the wrong set of plans, and here they were trying to build this building according to it, and they wasn't getting anywhere. That's why it cost so much money. So I took an inventory and got in touch with the 5th Corps area and told them how much money it was going to take to finish it. And this captain said, "Boy," he said, "you're the best man I've seen for a long time." He was just tickled to death that I was coming over to help him out. He was worried how he was going to get that camp done. So that must have been along in the latter part of July. So I notified him that I was getting pretty well finished up over there by that time. And I notified him that after all, I worked basketball and football games over the state of Indiana, and I would have to either give up my job over there or they'd have to transfer me over closer to Indiana. Well, they said, "We don't want to lose you, so we're going to put you over to a little town over at the edge of Indiana, not far over in the high, name of Sydney." Now, this town was this camp was pretty well built up when I got there. I just had to do a lot of finishing on it to get it done. But it was a place where, another one of those camps where the boys had come in. Now, the first camps were not handled that way because we went in as a construction crew and would finish the camp up, and then we would come back. Then the boys would move in. About that time, we'd move out. But this one over in Sydney, Ohio, and the one in West Virginia had the boys there, and they had to keep them busy, so we had to use them as much as possible. They weren't much good at carpenter work, young kids, but we got the jobs done there. And then finally I came home back to Indiana, and when I think it was maybe a year or so afterwards, this camp, they had a change in construction of these camps. In other words, it went back to the state. Indiana took care of their own camps, and Ohio took care of theirs, and West Virginia, and so on down the line, see? So I got orders that they would like to have me build the camp at Kendallville. Well, I studied around a little bit, and I said, well, I can get my work lined out so I can go. Back in those days, the job was pretty hard to find around here. We just had to catch as catch can. And you didn't go out, it didn't like today. And so I told them I'd take the job, and I went up there, and we hired all local men as much as possible to get the job done. Well, we had the job about 2/3 done, and I got a wire from the president, Franklin D. Roosevelt, discharge all non-union help and hire union help. So that here the people of Kendallville thought that they were going to get, they took the camp thinking they were going to get to prosper by having their people work on this camp. So it ended up, nearly all the people ended up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and they didn't get the last of it. So that wasn't a very good feeling in there.
Yeah.
So that has just been about my story on building the camps.
Yeah, the CCC camps. Let's go back, and then we're going to go back further yet. But when you were approached to build this first camp out here, what they refer to as Salamone on Hominy Ridge, and it was a mess hall and 4 or 5 barracks and a couple other outbuildings, as I remember seeing the pictures. And did I understand you right to say that there were no architect's drawings and topography studies or anything?
We had just, they were just plain mess hall buildings. We had usually 5 of them on each place.
Mm-hmm.
Or not mess hall, but barracks buildings. 5 barracks buildings. And 1 mess hall.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'd have 1 building for the headquarters of the personnel, see?
Mm-hmm.
And that was just about all there was to it. But it was just plain. And another thing I didn't tell you about was that this material was ordered to the 5th Corps area. And I'm telling you, a kid could have done as good a job ordering as they did. We'd end up with anywhere from 50 to 100 kegs of nails left over, and so
they weren't familiar with the construction.
They weren't familiar with the construction in. I told them I could save them a lot of money if they'd let me order my own material after this. But that was just
no topography. In other words, it was more or less up to the person that was there where to.
And he didn't know the score when it come to ordering lumber.
Yeah.
And that was what I found out about them. They run the costs up a lot more than what they should have been.
What did they do to take into consideration drainage and things of that nature?
Well, usually we didn't. That usually came after the CC boys came in. I laid them out so the barracks buildings would be kind of high and dry.
Yeah.
And the water would all drain away from them, and then it was up to the CC camp to take care of that when they come in and took over.
Yeah. And how many carpenters did you have to hire for this Salamone project?
I had 35 carpenters up there.
Yeah. Now, how did you find the carpenters?
Well,
obviously the labor, there was plenty of labor available.
There was plenty of labor available, and there's plenty of carpenters in that time. Mm-hmm. I remember Jake Slimmer was one of them. That's Clarence Slimmer's brother that was a carpenter around here for quite a while, and just several others there that we had the carpenters here to put on the job up there. Mm-hmm. But here I was the youngest one of the bunch running the job. Mm-hmm. And I always tried to give a man a day's work, and so we got the job done, got it done in good shape.
How much did you have to pay a carpenter in those days?
I think I believe we give them around 50 cents an hour.
And that was darn good wages.
That was darn good wages, and they were tickled to death to get that because they were trying to get the economy coming back about that time, see? And that was top wages back in those days.
And you were paid to oversee this? Were you getting?
Yes, I got a little extra pay for overseeing the job and for running it.
Yeah. And
of course, our carpenters in those days weren't all the best that there is. We have they later developed better mechanics after the economy got to coming back, and they got more work to do while they become better carpenters.
Mm-hmm. Would you consider this CCC program? Would you consider that now as you look back? Would you consider it would you consider it a good program, or what do you think, really?
I really I believe it was something to take care of the younger boys, to get them off the streets, and I think it did a lot of good. Mm-hmm. And it's just like I have reference to a mechanic boy that we later had come up here and took over the courthouse there, one of the programs, one of the soil programs around here in the county, and he's been here for a long time. He's now retired and living in Florida. I just saw him back here the other day, and he stayed with those CC camps, and that's where he got his experience. And otherwise, he may not have been able to do that.
Right.
So I think it had a good meaning to it in a lot of ways.
Right. And of course, we have to look now as they were really the first environmentalists, or whatever you want to call them, in planting trees and making fire lanes.
They did a lot of good work. They planted a lot of good shrubs and trees, and that forest up there looks pretty nice. It's
we're reaping the benefits.
Yeah, we're reaping the benefits of it from years back, and
right.
that's been quite a few years back.
Right, it has been.
But this camp up here was bigger. John Biggerstaff was the first man to come in here and take over the CC camp up here. They usually had an army man to come in, and so that was. He has 2 sisters here living here today, and that's Martha, who just retired out the high school, and Mary, who lives out the Avalon Apartments right now. She's our neighbor out there.
What was the terrain and so forth like? I mean, obviously there were no blacktop roads or anything like that. And how did you get your materials from LaGros out to the camp? You mentioned horses.
Yeah, there was a man that lived right there by the railroad track, and they'd send all this lumber in, and nails and plumbing and everything, in box cars or in flat cars or any way they could get it there. And they'd load it on a wagon and haul it out there and just dump it as near the building, and then after they got the buildings laid out where they could, so we didn't have to carry it too far. And it just took a little while to pick out where you're going to set all these buildings. We didn't get any survey or anything else. It was just pretty much up to us where we put the buildings. And they just give you a foundation plan, and which was just piers. Everything was built on piers, no regular foundation. But it worked out pretty good that way. And we just had to use our own judgment. Nobody come around and said anything to you, and then the boys move in.
You really had no direct supervision then from this 5th Army?
No, we didn't. The man, this Mr. Harrelson they sent in here, he had a sister that worked for the office, in the office over there. And that's how he got his job, was through his sister. He was out of work. So he came in here, and he was not a construction man. And it was pretty much left up to me how he did this and how he did that, and all he did was the paperwork. And you come to find out in this Army business, there's a lot of paperwork. You just make out one report right after another, and I let him keep that up because that's one job I never liked, was paperwork. I'd rather go out and build something and be done with it and let somebody else do this.
Did anything unusual or humorous or tragic happen when you had the whole crew out there? And
well, there was one thing happened. Of all these carpenters, I didn't have one that could cut a hip and valley roof. And I ended up cutting it myself because I had studied the square. And if you look at a square, there's a lot more than just the figures there on it. And a lot of these older men just didn't cut them that way. They just put one up there and mark it and fit it. And if it didn't fit, why, they'd cut it again. See? But you can take that square and lay out a roof, cut every rafter. In fact, I built a nurse's home out here. That was built that back in the early 20s. And my father and I was in business together then. And I cut all that roof, and I didn't cut it the same way he did. He had a way of cutting it, he'd measure his off. And I would figure mine in feet and inches, and make all my cuts. And he'd cut one way, and I'd cut the other, and we would get along, because he'd lay out a rafter, and then I'd lay one out, and then we'd check it, see if we weren't both on the beam, we'd have to go back and figure it over again. And we go cutting hips and valleys, and so many of people today just put them up there and fit them, and they don't use a square for that purpose, but that's what it's for.
Going back, you speak of your father and everything. How about your mother? What was her maiden name?
My mother was Annette Pearson.
Pearson?
Pearson, and there's a lot of them around here.
Right.
And they had lived here all their lives. This has been my parents' home. And so that was, and they'd come from down here around Rich Valley. And my father lived down there too. And my father's parents died early in life, and he was kind of an orphan. And but they've been Wabash people all their life.
But on your father's and your mother's side, they were both from
down around Rich Valley.
Down around Rich Valley. How did they?
My grandfather owned a farm down there, and so he finally sold that out. And then he went out here on Old 15 and bought the R.C. Thompson. You remember Arthur Thompson living out there on Old 15? That's our old home place. And there's where I was raised as a boy. We farmed that farm with horses. Didn't have any tractors in those days.
But your grandparents also were from Wabash.
Yes, everybody.
Yeah. Now, on your father's side, you say they died young.
They died young.
Yeah. Do you remember your grandparents on your mother's side, on the Pearsons?
Yes, because we lived with them for a while. I knew them quite well, and they were this brick house we lived in out there was a big old brick with a number of rooms in it.
This was at Rich Valley?
No, this was out here on the Old 15.
On Old 15. Yeah.
And I used to go to school over there at the old Lynn school, where you had all 8 grades in one over there.
Yeah.
we'd walk across the field to school.
How did Grandma and Grandpa Pearson, how did they happen to get to Wabash County? Did they ever tell you?
No. They came from over in Virginia. I know my grandmother came from over in Virginia,
Mm-hmm.
but I never did know just exactly where my grandfather came from. I think, but he had a brother that lived here too, by the name of Milo Pearson. He lived down here on the old road down here to the nursing home down there, the old brick house just before you get to it. That was his home right there, as I remember.
Right past the curve there?
Yeah, right past the curve, the
Yeah.
jog in the road down
Big
there.
house.
That big old brick.
Yeah. Woody Miller, I think, lives in there
Yeah,
now.
Woody Miller lives there now.
Yeah.
And that was Milo's place.
Mm-hmm. Was he older than your grandfather or younger?
No, he was a
older?
little bit younger.
He was younger. Now, he farmed that farm.
He farmed that farm.
Yeah.
And then you see my Andrew Pearson was my grandfather that lived on down on the prairie. And when they sold that farm, well, that's when they bought out here.
Yeah. And you lived with them.
We lived with them and farmed the farm. He was just kind of retired and didn't do much work at that time.
If you were going to describe your grandfather Pearson to one of your ancestors on down the line here someplace, what did he look like? What did Grandpa Pearson look
Well,
like?
he was a rather tall man. He was pretty well built and tall.
Mm-hmm.
And he retired rather early. In those days, you thought when people become 50 years old, they were getting pretty old. But he lived to be about 74 years old along in there.
Do you have a beard?
Yes, well, sometimes he had a mustache. He had a long mustache. He didn't wear a beard, but he wore the mustache.
Wear glasses?
Yes, he wore glasses to read with, mostly.
Did he keep his hair, or did he go bald?
Well, he kept his hair pretty much up until the time he passed away.
Yeah.
But he used to run a blacksmith shop down on the prairie.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to watch him when he had the forge there, and instead of taking an piece of iron and pulling the coals over there, he'd just take his hand and push the coals over on the fire. And I thought, why he wouldn't burn
tough
his
he
hand.
is, huh?
I guess he knew how to do it.
Yeah. Now, what did Grandma look like, Grandma Pearson?
Oh, she was a rather small lady, and she was from the South. I mean, she was from West Virginia, and she'd had several brothers that lived over in around Eaton, Ohio. And I used to go over and visit them once in a while.
Those would be your uncles.
Those would be my
Great
uncles.
uncle.
Yeah, great uncles.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they were named Armstrong. And so I can remember before the days you had automobiles and could get around when I was in high school. Our track team had a track meet in Earlham, Indiana. So I went down to that track meet, and I got on the interurban and went over to Eaton, Ohio on that interurban. And when I was on this car, I met up with a Von Ammerman. I don't know whether there's anything on him around here. I think he used to be. He's a very good. Lewell said he was his teacher, Lewell Carpenter, the other day.
Uh-huh.
And he went to manual training high school and taught down there
In Indianapolis.
in Indianapolis.
Right.
And we used to play down there, play football down there and basketball, and we'd always see him when we went down there. But he was on this interurban car when I was going over there. He was going to see one of my grandmothers, her brother, and I was going to see the other.
Uh-huh.
And they fought. This one brother fought in the Civil War.
And would that be the one you were going to see?
That was the one I went to see.
Uh-huh. Was he an old man then?
He was getting up in years pretty much at that time, and he was wounded in Dalton, Georgia, and so we every time we go through Dalton, I have to think of him.
Mm-hmm. What did he do? Was he up in years by this time and was not working?
I never remember him doing anything because I only knew him later in life when I went over there. And that was back quite a few years ago then, but he's been gone for some time.
You say Grandma Pearson was a smaller woman.
She was a smaller woman.
Did she wear glasses?
Yeah, she wore glasses. Mostly to read with. They didn't not all the time, but she would have to put her glasses on to read with. They seemed to have good eyes. And
Do you remember, did anybody ever tell you what her maiden name was? Grandma Pearson's maiden name.
She was an Armstrong.
Armstrong.
Armstrong, right.
What did she die of? If you remember
I
that.
just think probably old age.
Yeah. And Grandpa Pearson?
Grandpa, he died with heart trouble. He had hardening of the arteries. And
did your father ever mention his parents and what they died of? Or
his parents are buried down here in this cemetery, right down here above Rich Valley. There's a cemetery back over in the hills, and there's just an old road that they don't keep up, and we had to walk back there. I went back there and tried to find their graves one time, but it was not marked. Their graves weren't marked, and I never went back to get a plot of it so I could find it. But I did take my daughter and my son-in-law and the wife. I went down there one day, and they still have some of these pictures of the deceased on the graves.
Yes.
And we got quite a kick out of looking over those. They're just something that you're not used to seeing today.
Is there a name of that cemetery? Does that cemetery have a name?
It has a name, but I don't think it's marked, or you'd probably have to go to the courthouse to find out what the name of that cemetery was, because it's not very well kept up. The county was supposed to keep a roadway in there to it, but I think they've
abandoned you.
They just abandoned this, so we had to walk quite a ways to get back in there.
Where is the Pearsons? Where are they buried then?
The Pearsons are buried over here in the Quaker Cemetery over here on the south side.
On the south side, yeah.
And all my parents are buried there too.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of Pearsons around there.
Common name.
Dr. Ed Pearson.
Yes. Were they relatives, same family?
Yeah. My mother and Dr. Ed Pearson were first cousins.
Yeah, I see. Where did you go to grade school?
I went to grade school in that little Lynn schoolhouse I was telling you about back over there that it's been now tore down, where we had all 8 grades in one. I went to the 7th grade there. And then my grandfather sold the farm, and we came over just above the hill on Waterworks Road there, the second farm on the right-hand side, where it's Amber's farm today. I finished going to Lynn Lawns for the last part of the 7th grade and the 8th grade. We didn't move over there till the spring, so I only went there in those days we got out in April. So I just moved the 1st of March, and so I only went about 2 months down to Lynn Lawns. And then I finished up the 8th grade there. Then come to high school days, my oldest brother had gone to Wabash High School, and Lynn Lawn didn't play any football then, and I wanted to play football. So I came in those days there was a ruling that you could go to the closest school. Well, Wabash High School was closer than Lynn Lawn, so the county had to pay my tuition into Wabash High School. So that's how I go. My parents didn't have the money to pay tuition in those days, so that was the way we got around it. So I got to go to Wabash High School, and I played football and basketball in Wabash High School.
What year did you graduate?
I graduated in 22.
22.
But I played with the All-State team in 20, and we were undefeated, and we're not even scored on all year long. So we've had several reunions. We had a 35-year reunion, and we had a 50-year reunion of those boys.
I might point out that where this tape is being made, we are catty-corner from the high school that you attended.
That's the one that I went to.
That's at the corner of Hill and Cass, and they didn't move out to the new high school until 1926. So if anyone's looking for it someday, they'll know where it was.
That's the building right there. I went 4 years there.
Where did you practice football in those days?
We went down to the old Carroll Street. Leewell Carpenter was our coach. And George Yarnell came down and helped out some. He's one of the old WAA players. And it's all been changed. I've gone by there. I can remember the old board fence all the way around the football field there, and the amphitheater down to the west end. And so there used to be some trees over there, and then when the WAAs would play, well, I'd go climb a tree so I could see the football game. Either that or carry somebody's helmet in so I could get into the football game.
Those were great years, obviously.
Oh, those sure were. I never forget those as long as I live.
Fun years, too, I'm sure. Yeah. How about the basketball coach, and who was the coach, and
Well,
where did you...
leave off.
You were talking about the Wabash basketball team.
Well, in those days, we played basketball down at the old community gym. And it had been condemned, and so I guess they got it fixed up so we could go ahead and play down there. That's where we used to have to play our basketball games. We had no heat in there and no showers. Well, we had showers, but all we had was cold water. So I can remember I used to get the fifth, we had a study period. And I'd get my last period off, so I could go down through the alley and pick up a bunch of board boxes and take them up and bust them up and warm up the gym a little bit so we didn't have it too cold to practice in. And that's how we started out in basketball. But we had no pot-belly stove up there we used, and we'd get a good fire and take the chill off of there. And if you wanted to shower, you went down and took a cold shower. And so,
Might point out the basketball, the community gym, is at the end of T Street there, at the end of Huntington Street and Main Street.
It still stands.
The
there.
building's still there.
And they turned it into a machine shop.
Yeah.
Mrs. Overman had it there at the last. And
how did you play your games on Saturday or Friday night, or what was basketball schedule in those days, and where did you go and so forth?
Usually we played all our basketball and on Friday night. Sometimes we would play on Saturday nights. Sometimes what we would do is maybe we'd go to Fort Wayne we'd go to Hartford City on Friday night. We could take the interurban over there. And then we'd take the interurban into Fort Wayne, and we'd stay overnight at Fort Wayne and come back on the interurban into Wabash. Now most of our schedule was laid out around the interurban.
Was a road trip, huh?
Yeah, it was a road trip, and that's the only. We didn't have any cars to go in then. In those days, we just had to do the best we could. And our football trips were mostly on Saturday. We could go down and play the Indianapolis schools because we had a train going out of here right to Indianapolis in the morning. Get us in there by 11, 12 o'clock, and we could play football, and then by night we could come back to the station down there and get on and get home that night around 8 o'clock on the passenger train. So that's where most of our football and basketball was carried, so we could get to it by interurban.
How was the discipline in sports in those days? I mean, the relationship between the coach and the players, and the training rules, and one mistake and you're out, and that type of thing.
Well, we didn't. In those days, you wanted to play, and then I don't think we were quite as hard to get along with as the boys today. I know I spent 23 years of officiating over the state of Indiana, and in basketball and football. I'd work approximately 65 ball games a year. And my last years of officiating, I thought I had a pretty good schedule because I'd work about 9 ball games in our Central Conference, and they were usually won the state championship all the time. And some of our games in those days were assigned to us. And I was situated, so I was pretty much in the middle of all of them. I didn't have too far to drive. I know I used to work such games as in basketball as the Frankfurt-Muncie game. And we had to go work at both places. We'd go to Frankfurt and work the game, and then we'd go to Muncie and work it. A friend of mine from Anderson worked it with me. His name is George Williams. And then I'd go up to Elkhart, worked at Elkhart and Mishawaka. Well, I could go up there, and Dutch Struck left here and went to Mishawaka, and so I followed him up there in basketball. Mm-hmm. But I was already working in football up there. I used to make most of my schedule up around there because they played awful good football up around South Bend and Mishawaka. And I worked the Mishawaka Central South Bend game. It was played in Notre Dame Stadium for 6 years up there straight.
Uh-huh. Would they draw a big crowd for that?
We'd have 35,000 people out there to see that ball game.
High school game.
We played in the stadium up there, and It was, well, I got a chance to work on a nice turf. And that was something really to work in a stadium that big. That's for a small town boy.
When you finished high school, was there any, you played basketball and football, was there any possibility of going to college on a scholarship?
Well, or I'll tell you what happened to me at that time. I always wanted to go and be an architect. And my folks were not able to send me, so I thought I'd go out and work a couple of years. And that was my ambition, to work and save my money so I could go to school. Well, you know, by 2 years' time, I was in the contracting business. And I was competing against contractors around here and holding my own. And we didn't have very much of a crew, though. We had maybe 3 or 4 men working, and my father. But, I just, after working 2 years, I was doing so well that I thought, well, I have no business going to school now after building up a business and going away and leaving that.
Yeah.
So I stayed with it. And then another thing, when I went to Florida, I had a chance to stay in business right in St. Petersburg, Florida, because I married my wife came from St. Petersburg, and I worked for her uncle down there. And that's how we got acquainted. And so I'd go back and work for him in the wintertime back in those days, contractors would work up till November. And they would just shut up shop and you wouldn't see them till spring.
This was in the 20s.
Yeah, that was back in the 20s. They didn't work in the wintertime. They wouldn't go out and work when it was cold. They just sat to the fire. But they'd draw plans and get ready for next year. So I couldn't see go in that kind of business, so I used to have a floor business. I sanded floors and finished floors. They could do that in a warm house in the wintertime, right? And worked it in that way, but that still wasn't satisfactory. So I let it go, and I'd go down there and work and come back here and pick up my job, and my father would stick around and finish up anything that I needed. And so in 1934, he says, I'm going to quit you. So he retired in 1934, and I've been on, my wife and I have been in business ever since then. 2 of us. She ran the office, and I ran the construction business. So we've been in business. I've been in business over 50 years now, and that's when I retired.
How did you meet your wife? Well, first of all, we better put her name, and we better let everyone know who she is and what her maiden name was.
She was before she was married. She was Lina King.
L-I-N-A?
L-I-N-A. Yeah. Lina King. And her parents, her father worked for the ACL. He was an inspector on the ACL Railroad.
Right.
And I got acquainted with her. I'll have to go back to basketball first. I loved my basketball and football both, and I used to play a little independent, semi-pro ball around here. And then when I went down to Florida, I'd play basketball down there. Well, I played with the YMCA team.
At St. Petersburg?
At St. Petersburg. And our first year down there, we had some college graduates come in there. And we had one boy from up east on that good ball club up there, the high school team, and played played for several years, 4 years, without losing the ball game or something like that up there. We had one of those boys. And one of the boys came from Mississippi and one from North Carolina. So we had a pretty good ball club. And we were undefeated one year. So I've said this, that I've been happy to play with 2 undefeated teams, one in football when I played with the All-State team in 20 here at Wabash, and the YMCA basketball team in St. Petersburg, Florida. Now, we played all the small colleges in Florida and beat them. And we thought we were getting pretty good, so the next year we brought down the New York Celtics and Macon right-away team out of Georgia. We kind of got our ears beat a little bit there. But it was a lot of fun.
Sure.
We didn't get any money for playing, but we would have we'd go over to the Serena hotel and have a big banquet afterward and get to meet everybody, and it was a lot of fun. And we made quite a name for St. Petersburg over this basketball team. But you know, in the South, it was hard to get people to get a crowd out. You wouldn't they'd be amazed at the crowds we get out here in Indiana. But if you got out 40, 50 people to a ball game down there, you had a big crowd.
Mm-hmm.
So I know the night we played the Celtics down there, we had one of the biggest crowds I think that's ever seen a basketball game at that time in Florida. We had 4,000 people out there to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd built an amphitheater in front of the Boston Braves amphitheater where they played baseball. We built a basketball court out there and kept it covered with canvas and played outside.
Uh-huh.
And that was where we played.
Uh-huh.
So how I met my wife was when we had an outdoor court at the YMCA where we were. So we got pretty cool over there. So we had to find an inside court to practice on. So this was getting in the spring of the year and March along in there someplace. And so my wife happened to be practicing for the senior play at the same time. And so it happened I don't know, for some reason or other, we get out about the same time they were through practicing. I got taken her home from there. So that was the start of our
Romance.
Friendship and romance.
What year would that have been?
That was about I'd say around 23 or 24 along in that season, 23 and 24.
And then you came back to Wabash?
And I had a chance. I left when I worked for my wife's uncle down there, he was about the biggest contractor there in St. Petersburg. And this was one thing that I had to weigh pretty heavy, was should I go in business in St. Petersburg, Florida, or should I go back to Indiana? I could go either place. I was set up either place to go because I had a reputation here, and I had down there. Why I could have stepped right in. My uncle wanted to leave. He got up and went to Oklahoma, and just left an awfully good business right there. Uh-huh. And I could have been in on the ground floor down there, which would have been really nice by now. But I never regretted it. I've always been happy. Wabash has been good to me, and I came back here where I had credit and people knew me. Yeah. And if I got in a pinch, I had places I could go get it, and that meant a whole lot.
Those were uncertain times too.
Yeah, that's right. There was times when you needed help.
Yeah. How long did you go together then before you were married?
We went together. I met her in 24, and we went together till 1927.
And you got married down there?
We got married down there. Mm-hmm. I remember I only had, at the wedding, we were married in her aunt's house. Mm-hmm. And this aunt was kind of an aunt that looked after the whole family. She was quite wealthy and well-to-do, and so she had a big home there. So nothing to do but we get married in her home. So I only knew one family in St. Petersburg. Mm-hmm. Well, I knew two families at that time, and that was one of the reasons why I went to St. Petersburg. I went there because I had a Sunday school teacher by the name of Mary Tippy. I used to go to Middle Street Methodist Church over on the south side, the old church over there, mm-hmm. and Mary Tippy was my Sunday school teacher, and I knew him. And then my father used to work in the carpenter work with two Adams brothers, Hugh and John Adams. So I knew them, and this Hugh had just married Mrs. Farr out here, and so when I'll tell you what happened on the way down, there was two other fellows went down with me, and they got down to Raleigh, North Carolina, and they turned around and come back, and I said, I'm not going to come back until I go to Florida. I said, I've told everybody in Wabash I was going to Florida, and that's where I'm going. Before I may just set a foot on Florida soil and come back, but I said I'm going on.
You're going to accomplish your purpose.
So I went down the next day after they left. It was Fred Morrow and Nate Gardner, and so I drove on without them the next day and went on down to Jacksonville, Florida. Stayed in a hotel down there. And I got to thinking, we were going to go to Miami when we started out. I said, I know nobody in Miami. I'd be a fool to go down there. but I do know some people in St. Petersburg.
Uh-huh.
So I went over, I changed my course and went to St. Petersburg, and that's where I've been going ever since.
And that's where you found your wife?
And then I found my wife there, and when we got married, there was a Von Adams from here. And we had her to come to the wedding. Now, that was the only one I had on my side when I got married.
Uh-huh. In her aunt's house?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But she used to live with, over on the south side, Albie Watson, and I think she was Aunt Adams, and that's who she used to live with. She married in Northup down there, a very well-to-do person.
What time of year was it you got married in?
We got June the 20th.
So then you were coming back for your summer work in Wabash?
Yeah, I was coming back. Oh, I came back and then went back to get her.
Yeah.
And I can remember in those days, jobs were hard to get, and we got married right in the Depression. And but we made it. I did anything. I went down here and worked basketball games in the community gym, and for $1 a game, and anything.
Yeah.
But Wabash has been good to us. We've been very fortunate. And
was your home life, as a young child, how many were there in the family?
I was raised in a family of 4 boys.
4 boys, no girls.
No girls. And
where did you fit in?
I was the third one.
Third one.
And I lost my oldest brother just a year before I got married in 1926. He was killed in the Container Corporation down here. And
industrial accident?
Yeah. He was one of these type of person that he wouldn't wait 1 minute for a millwright to shut the mill down. He'd get on and put a belt on, or he was that type of person. He was a hard worker. And he slipped on some grease and threw him into a flywheel down there.
Yeah. Now, was he unmarried at that time?
He was married, and his widow lives up here on Carroll Street right now. We built that house for him back in the 20s.
I'll be nice. And what else? What were the other members of the family?
Well, I have another brother, older brother yet, and that's Robert. He started out working for the New York Central Railroad, and then he transferred over and went with the Florida East Coast Railroad for a while, and then he came back and kind of took over the farming, and he now lives. He sold the farm over here that we lived on above the waterworks over there. He sold that, and he bought the Sam Eby farm out on Old 15, just about 4 doors north of 16 out there. So he's been out there the rest of his life.
And then you have
I have one brother younger that has always been with me. He's been one of my crane operators for quite a number of years, and he's worked for me all his life.
Yeah. What was home life on the farm? Let's say when you were 8 or 10 or 12 years old.
Well,
hard.
It was a busy life.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
Was it tough, or?
Well, we did nearly, as we were boys, we did nearly all the farming ourselves, and we went out with teams of horses when you used about 3 horses on an old plow, and it seemed the seasons were different then. My goodness, you could plow in March then, but look at it now. These people, it's a good thing they have tractors and a quick way of getting their crops in that they didn't have then, because they couldn't make it if they had to go back to the old ways of doing, because our season seems to be so short. But we were able to go ahead and get our crops in and do a lot of farming, and we did most of the farming because my father worked in the carpenter business, and we had to do the homework, and we used to work. I know I drove the binder when I didn't have enough strength in this arm to use a whip to kind of handle the horses. I had to go out and pick up a little pail of rocks and carry them on the binder, and if I caught one lagging, well, I could just crack him one, and that was my way of keeping them going. I run the binder always, and then I used to run the hay for it because I was small and I was the youngest one. I could.
What was Christmas like when you were a kid?
Well, we were a family that didn't have a lot of means, and our Christmas to us, we didn't have too many things to play with. We had to make our own entertainment. And most of our Christmas was clothing in those days. And
Store clothing or homemade?
store clothing, and I know my mother made all my clothes, and made her overalls and pants and everything. But there could be some things that she'd buy and put very little. But that's what's most of our Christmas. We might have got one toy, a sled or something like that, but the rest of it was clothing, and we had to in those days. And she passed away in about 1918.
So you would have only been how old then? About
I was in
14?
No, I was a freshman in high school then.
14.
And
15 years old.
she fell in the barn out here in this new place when we just moved in there. We lost her. We'd been there about a year or so, and we had a hay mow. I had a bank barn, see, and she was feeding the horses at noon, and must have gotten dizzy or something and fell down the bank barn. And my brother didn't find her till he came home from school. He was going to school over here at that time. So those days we didn't have the surgeons and what have you like we have today, or maybe she could have been living a little while longer.
Did your father remarry?
Never remarried.
Never remarried.
No,
Well, you kids more or less, then from that day on, you did more or less did your own.
we more or less raised ourselves. Now we had a very dear aunt to come in and take over because my youngest brother was just 4 years old.
Now, the aunt was on your mother's side?
My mother's sister, and she promised to come in and make a home for us till we were all old enough to leave.
Yeah. Did she finally marry then?
No, she never married.
She never married.
She passed away maybe 6 or 7 years ago.
That would have been, she'd sort of been like your mother then,
Yes,
really.
yes, she was. She came over and took care of mother's place and made a home for us and kept us all together.
Do you remember anything favorite that your mother used to cook for you boys that you particularly liked? You don't
I
see
know
anymore? Maybe our taste buds are shot. I don't know. Mush or...
You think back and you get quite a kick out of it. The change of meals that you have. Now, when you live on a farm, you don't not able to go get a snack in the middle of the morning or a cup of coffee or this and that. You went out in the fields, you went out there and stayed till noon.
Right.
And I know we'd butcher beef and we'd have a hind quarter of beef laying there, and my father would get up and cut off the steak for breakfast, and we had steak and gravy for breakfast and fried mush and things like that. We had to have something, not very often pancakes, because they didn't stick with you very good. You get pretty hungry before noon. You just ate pancakes. But
you had to have something substantial.
You had to have a substantial meal, breakfast, and fried potatoes. We even had fried potatoes for breakfast. They still do that a lot down through the south. They have the fried potatoes. So we got along pretty good. We could go to noon, and then we'd come in and have a good dinner and back to work again. I know a lot of these kids that when I was going to school, they had a pretty easy life. I had to get up and milk 4 or 5 cows before I come to school. Got ready to come to school in the morning. And I know most of them roll out of bed in time to wash your face and hands. And
you'd already been up for
hair. I'd been up since about 5 o'clock working.
Yeah,
but that didn't hurt me any.
No, that's what I was going to say.
That didn't hurt me any. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. But you do remember the steak and mush with gravy for breakfast?
Yes, indeed. We'd slice off the mush and fry it for breakfast.
Yeah.
And then we all we had was an old cook stove to cook that on, too.
What kind?
Oh, it was an old cast iron top cook stove, where you'd throw wood and coal in it, and on the back end you had a place to put the rainwater. We always had rainwater and to wash your face and hands in. And we didn't have any running water and this and that. Not in those days.
Yeah. How many horses did they keep?
Well, we used to keep around 6 to 8 horses. Usually we could have 2-3 horse teams, and for planting we had 2 extras so we could use the planter without changing off and keeping everything going that way, because you had to work, put in a lot of long hours in those days.
These were obviously just workhorses, and they weren't Belgians
No,
or
there was
Clydesdales.
nothing fancy about them. They were just horses.
Yeah. And where would your
And mules. We used to have a few mules.
You had mules also?
Yeah.
Where would your dad get the horses usually?
Well, we would get the horses from any place. Well, we used to have sales all around over the country, and we'd buy them up. And that was one of the reasons. When we first went to the farm, when we went on the old Lynn farm, that was the old Lynn farm out there. We called it Thompson later bought. We had a big barn out there, one of the biggest barns in Wabash County. And we just had stocked up our sheep and cattle and horses, and we didn't any more get that done until here along come a fire and just burned up everything. We got a few horses out of it, and that's about all. That was quite a fire that night. I know I was 6 years old when that happened.
It burned the barn.
Burned the barn and all the livestock in it. So we had to start out and do everything all over again.
What would you do on Saturday night?
Well, Saturday night we just once in a while my cousin from Martin Adams here in Wabash lived here, went to school here. He'd had a paper route, and he'd deliver his papers, and he'd ride that distance on his bike out there. And he'd get out there before dark, and we'd have a party. We'd either go camping or do something over the weekend, and just had a good time. And we used a rifle quite a bit, and did a lot of shooting, and so we could hold our own when it come to handling firearms, and just made our own entertainment. We didn't have anything to, and we used to play a little football. We'd have football.
Did you ever get a chance to come to town then sometimes on Saturday or Saturday night?
We would come to town maybe once a month. About once a month.
How? What means of transportation?
Well, in 1913, we bought a touring car. That was one of the first ones out in those days. That's when you came in and jacked it up and put the tires up so you wouldn't wear out the tires quicker, and you changed the tires all around from one wheel to another, and it was quite an ordeal. That was about back in 1913.
Was that one of the first cars out in the county?
That was one of the first cars out in the county.
Yeah. And what brand was it?
It was a Ford.
Ford. And where did he buy it?
He bought that over at the Fountain. A man by the name of Hartman over there. He had a Ford dealer over there, and I think you paid in those days about $200 or $300 for a car. And that was our first car, and we could go to town in it. But Dad drove a horse and buggy several years there, back and forth here into town every morning, and to come to work.
Of course, in the wintertime they had no...
No, that's why.
You couldn't use the car in the wintertime.
You couldn't use a car in the wintertime, and then we'd use sleds, and we had a team of horses. We had a sled with runners and bob, and just like one of these grain beds that they haul grain in on a bobsled. And we used that to come to town in a lot of times. It was a lot of fun. Snow, it was cold, but you could have plenty of straw in there, you keep warm.
Of course, you lived on the other side of the bridge. Was the present bridge up at that time, or what was the bridge facilities across the river? Was the covered bridge gone by that time?
The covered bridge, yeah, it was gone. We didn't have that. This bridge, we only had the one bridge there. As I remember, there was a flood about 1913. That 1913 flood.
Yes.
And we came down and went over the bridge and came down to where it cut across right there by the Ford garage. We cut through there. Then later, when we took the interurban line out of the city, I built the interurban station. That was one of my contracts.
Which one?
The one down on Wabash Street, South Wabash Street. When I changed the tracks around and come in down there. I built the freight house down there and the interurban station.
Yeah, that interurban station was approximately where from, how many yards north would you say?
Well, I tell you, it was right there where it was right there where the bowling alley is today. The bowling alley is sitting on some of the ground over there. It used to be, before the traction company bought that, I know, they used to have that for a dog pound down there, where they buried all the dogs, you know. And in those days, you had to do all your excavating by hand. And we had to dig through all those dogs in there, and it was a hot day, and if that wasn't a mess, I'm telling you, that sends you home sick.
Yeah.
Oh, I never forget that.
Yeah.
But we did build that station there, and when they moved the traction company out of the city.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of your contracting days and the jobs that you had. And obviously, you started small.
I started out with just a wheelbarrow and a little cement mixer, and just my father and I working. And we built that thing. I built that business up to, during the war. I had 65 men working for me.
This was World War II.
World War II. I had 65 men working for me.
In the construction business, before I changed this tape here, and you were telling me about starting out with one wheelbarrow, and
I saw what I saw was the machine age coming on, and then I told you about the sanding machine. I finally bought a sanding machine. I could sand floors, and then every time I get a little money ahead, I bought some machinery. So I just kept on until it got to the place where I had to have more machinery, and just kept on. And so I'd have big cement mixers to do the work with, dump trucks. And then after I got that, well, first thing you know, I needed bulldozers, cranes. So I just kept on going until I had a pretty good sized construction crew.
yeah.
And I was able to do most anything I could. It seemed like in order to stay in business, you had to be pretty flexible. It got so that we had so many people, we did a lot of open ditch work. And we had people that didn't know how to figure. And an engineer put an estimate on there, and these contractors would go out there and they thought they had to cut the estimate to get the job, and that's what they do. And these engineers wasn't about to let anything get away, and they did jobs so cheap that they couldn't stay in business. And right now, there are just nearly not very many of them left.
Explain what an open ditch work is.
That's in the county where it's an open drainage ditch. They use for draining, and all their tile ditches drain into this open ditch, and then it goes off into the river, and it's used that way. And it seems that where you have moisture, these trees grow about 3 or 4 times faster than they do where they don't get moisture. And it gets to be quite a problem cutting the brush off of them and getting rid of that brush. See, they're not supposed to let you burn any more of it. What are you going to do with it? You got to do something with it.
Get rid of it.
So they let the farmers get rid of it now. They can burn it in the winter time and kind of warm up things a little bit. But that makes these open ditches come a lot higher than what they used to.
Yeah. And number one, a ditch is necessary to farm for drainage.
That's right.
Number two, that many of these ditches and the precedents for ditches and who cleans them and who pays for them and everything is set by law.
That's by law, right.
And it often goes to the circuit court to determine
who's going to do these ditches,
yeah,
and how it's going to be done. They got to make out the assessment for each person. They have to pay for that.
Yeah.
And
but you were doing the contracting on these ditches.
Yes,
digging the ditches.
We bid them off by contract and
yeah,
go in and so many yards of excavation and bid them off. And with this trees and everything growing into them, they just close these ditches off, and they have to be cleaned about every 10 years. So there's a lot of them in the county right now that should be cleaned. But people just don't like to part with the money. Now, the farmers are making money now. They're coming along all right. They're not hurting. So you can see how they're fixing up their places. A lot of them are fixed up nice and painted up. And back 10 years ago, they weren't doing that because they weren't making the money that they're making today. So it shows it works all ways and makes a lot of good business for the construction business.
Well, then give me the development of the business, the construction business. You were getting larger and buying more equipment, and then
I got so that then I wanted something to kind of, in the construction business, the owner does not have any insurance plan back in those days. So what I did, I bought back in 1937, I bought that vacant lot off of Mrs. Charles Latcham up there. just to have something to do. And so I started putting buildings on it and improving it. Well, I had the equipment to go back on the back part of it and bring up dirt and make the fill with and make it valuable. So I put that one building in there and didn't any more than get it up until Mahaney came along. And he wanted to put the Cadillac agency out there. So I went right north of it and built a little building and moved into it. A small building over there. And so I didn't any more than get it done until Kroger Egg Exchange come along and says, we need a place to process eggs. You got a place here that's a nice location. How about you building me a building? Building us a building over here. And we'll lease it off of you for 10 years. I said, that's good enough. So I went ahead and put that building up for Kroger's. And they stayed in there for maybe quite a few years. And then they outgrew it. They were satisfied with the location, the building and all, but they just outgrew it, and they went up and built a new building up there. Sparky Forrest came to me one day and he says, who's going to rent that building out there? I says, nobody so far. He says, well, why don't you rent that to us? I said, that's fine. So we went ahead and fixed it all up for Magnetics, and they're in there today. They're still there.
You're still renting it to them?
Still renting it to them.
Yeah.
And I'd fixed up a concrete plant down there, and Downs and Wiles bought the lumber business out and the concrete business out, so they took over that down there. And I went on the back part of the place and built me up a place to operate out of back there, across from Ford's place.
Did you take any jobs in those days? This has been over a period of years that you built this. Were you taking any jobs out of the county or any distance?
I've always been this way. I love to stay in my own hometown and work. And I did do a few jobs away from here. I used to go to Huntington. I had a good friend, Gordon Watson, up there. He was city engineer up there, and he always liked for me to put his sewers in for him up there. I did in rock excavation. Seemed like whenever you say anything about rock, these contractors would
Panic.
They just turned thumbs down on it. They didn't want anything to do with it. So I put in several sewer jobs up there. Went out around the hospital out there. Then I put in the Gardendale sewer up there. Comes out underneath the bypass up there and on past that shopping building up there and the trailer court back in there. I put that one in, and I put all the sewers in around the college.
But basically you stayed where you could get back and forth every night and get your equipment back and forth.
I never could see driving back and forth, and my men were all local. What men I hired were all from Wabash. And that made it pretty nice. And so we were all right here where I could talk to them. We didn't have radios in those days where you could...
Instant communication.
Instant communication, and which is wonderful. The boys have that today, and it saves a lot of steps and a lot of misunderstanding.
Yeah.
And I didn't have that. I had to use a telephone or go out on the job itself.
Yeah.
But when General Tire come in here, I was one of the first ones that started on General Tire. And we were... I'll never forget, I had a WPA project out at the hospital. And the Depression came on, you did anything to make a living those days. And I had a sanitation deal where we went out and put in these outhouses all around over the county, and I wasn't too proud. And then they had the hospital job come along, and they didn't have anybody to run that had that kind of supervision. So they asked me to take care of the hospital job. And then I was building a filling station down on East Market Street down there, right across from John Richard's store down there now. You know that station right in the corner? I had that one going, and I had a building going for Clarence Slimmer right down there next to Slimmer's Tin Shop there. I was putting in a building for him. And the horse barn that burned down DeRay's, I had it going, so I was pretty busy right then.
This was in the 30s during the Depression.
Back in the 30s, when the General Tire bought the building out here.
Service motor truck, though.
So they asked me to come out there and to look over the buildings and see what they needed and patch the roofs. They were leaking quite bad. So this man they sent in here didn't know too much about it. He was just sent in here to get a job done. And I took him up on a job one day, and we were trying to patch those rotten roofs. See how long they'd been in there since they've been in there 10, 15 years. Water run through them, and they were just about all rotted out. And I said, listen, I said, my time's pretty valuable right now. I said, I'm wasting my time and your money trying to patch these roofs. Someday before very long, you're going to end up putting a new roof on there. And you know, I left out there, and he got somebody else, and they ended up putting new roofs on out there. Well, I didn't go back out there for several years. Finally, they called me up one day. They wanted to put a cafeteria down the west end. That's just a little bit before the war. Want to put a cafeteria in there and some other work, and I bid it off for them. He said, why in the world weren't you out here when we had all this work to do? I said, well, I was pretty busy. I didn't need a job then. But I said, I was out here and trying to ask me to do something that wasn't right to do, and I knew it, and I just walked off the job, and I've stayed off. And I'm here now.
Yeah.
I said, well, you ought to have been back here when we had a lot of it to do, but that was an awfully good account. They were very good to me, and I put the shipping room on out there, and put all those sewer excavations in, and water lines around the edge of the fire protection in there. And that's how I happened to get the man that I have right now. But he was a foreman. He had charge of building this new building on the east end out there. And was looking, for several years, and I wanted to quit and get out of it. So I was getting ready to go to Florida, and they gave me this sewer line, or water line, to put down through the factory. I got it all organized. And I said to him, you're not very busy out here. General Tire had to do one section for them, and then wait till they moved over in the new building. Then we could tear down the other part. And there was a lull in there about 3 months. I says, you're not doing anything. Why don't you run this job for me? I want to go to Florida. And when I got back, I was well satisfied with him. General was satisfied with his work on the new building out there. I said to him, why don't you take over this company out there, buy this company out there, you and my nephew, and just take over the business. He says, I don't have that kind of money. I said, well, let me worry about that. So when we got around to it and he finished this building up, I made all arrangements for him to take over out there. I said, I'll fix it so you can buy it. And I started in, and they are doing much more I'd say 3 times the business that I was doing out there, because I wasn't caring for that kind of business. Mm-hmm. Today they have 5 bulldozers going, as big as I used to have 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And they got about 3 cranes going, and they're going to be a big outfit if they keep on going like they're going. And he's a good engineer. He's got a little college background to him, but he has a practical experience. He's just hired a new engineer for the construction that has his stamp. He can draw plans, and so he's really moved right along.
Did in the construction business, you can make it big, and you can also lose your tail big. You ever remember one where you really lost your tail on a bad
yes, I
estimate, or for one reason or another? Give me some examples of some of the funny things. They're funny now that you.
Well, I tell you, I used non-union help most of the time, and for this reason. Not that I was against you. I've belonged to the union and stayed in the union while all the time I was working for anybody else. But non-union does not work in a construction company as small as Wabash. For this reason, you have to call in and get somebody out of the local, and if you got men that you can go out there, and you got one carpenter that can, if he don't have carpenter work to do, he can pick up a pick and shovel, and he can lay out this, and he can work at that, and he can do things without somebody say, that's not in your line. That's my line. You just don't work out in a small organization like that. So I think that's one thing that helps a lot. And you pretty much know. Well, I'll tell you one thing I had. It cost me considerable money one day. I was putting in and this was for Gordon Watson, and he never did forget it. I was putting a basement in a church over there at the fountain. And they were supposed to put the drain in, the church put the drain in coming up to it. Well, somehow or other we had a flash flood. That drain got stopped up. And I'd started to unpin the back wall. And that water just came in and washed out that whole back of that church and let the wall down. Well, it cost about $10,000 to put that wall.
It's funny now.
Yeah, it's funny now, but it wasn't so funny then.
Yeah.
And I didn't have insurance to take care of it. My insurance company, he said that's something that wasn't covered in an ordinary insurance deal. If they'd had the drain working, which they told me they did have, it wasn't my fault that drain wasn't working.
Mm-hmm.
But I put that building back up, and it never cost him one red cent. Now that was, I always tried to be fair with everybody and to do what was right. And I'll tell you another one, this is a queer, one of the queerest things I ever had happen to me in construction. I built those 3 houses for Middings out there, for the 2 boys and the Middings that live on the corner out there.
Is that State Street?
On State Street,
right.
And
right off Manchester Avenue.
Yeah, right off Manchester Avenue.
Right.
Well, I had the front house there, the brick veneer for Middings, the senior Middings, built. And in those days, we run the surface water off into the drains in the sewer. Sanitary sewer, 6-inch sanitary sewer. It was all in. And I come off of that with a T and run a drain tile all the way around that building wall there to pick up any moisture around there, which was good construction. Poured a cement floor all over that floor. Well, I hadn't any more than got that done, and it was dried out and secured pretty good. Till they got about 2 feet of water in a flash flood out there in the center of that street. Somehow or other that manhole top got flopped around out there and got knocked off.
Mm-hmm.
Believe it or not, all the weight of this water went down this manhole. Pressure came back this sewer so great you could just see all the way around that basement wall where it picked up that floor all the way around there and cracked that floor. All the way around that basement. And here was a center post in the center of the room, by the stairway. The pressure was so big, you'd come up and crack your plastering upstairs.
Huh. How did you solve that one?
I tore out the floor and put a new floor in. Went outside and put a backwater valve in the outside main sewer line, so if it ever happened again, it comes in against the backwater valve.
You just stopped.
Never had any trouble since.
Happy day.
But there was another one. I took my boys and tore out the floor and replaced the floor and cracked the plastering, or patched the cracked plastering.
Yeah. Were there any times during the 30s that you didn't think you were going to make it, or, let's face it, it was tough.
Well, you know this, I'll tell you, back in the 30s, I never liked to collect on a job until we had the thing done, get the job done, and then settle up for it. That's the way I used to do business. And back in the 30s, I saw a time when a letter laid around the house and never got mail for several days before I got some money in the house in order to buy a 3-cent postage stamp. But the money was so close right then, we could go down to McNarney's grocery store and get credit down there. But when it comes to having the cash around, and in those days, people would call up and say, well, what have you got in the icebox? We're going to have a party tonight. And we just go in and that's what we had to eat, what we had out of the icebox. Don't think it wasn't tough. I saw it when it was plenty tough.
Yeah. But was there any time that you really didn't think you were going to make it?
Oh, I didn't. It didn't worry me too much because I put in a lot of long hours, and as soon as I got any money ahead, I tried to build myself a house right down there on East Main Street. and I did all the work myself and built that house. And I didn't pay very much money for it. It was an old rundown place, but I finally got it fixed up in a pretty nice place. And but you just had to do it as you made the money, and I'd put it in there. But I never. Oh, I kind of worried one day. I bid on this shipping room out to General Tire and Rubber Company, and they gave me a chance to back out of it if I wanted. And I don't know how much low I was on it, but I was low enough that it made it. They looked at it pretty much, and they said, "Do you want it, or do you want me to let the next bidder have it?" And I said, "No, I'll put the bid in there, and I'm just as honest. I want to do the job." And I did it, and I made out very good on it. They said, "Well, you might lose your house on it," and I said, "Well, I don't believe I'm going to do that." And they thought I wasn't going to make out on it, but I had good help, and we went in there and we worked plenty hard, and we got the job done. And I told them I'd take another and it's the same price when I got through that one. But you often wonder sometimes. Now, I was kind of wondering one time, made me kind of think in my later years in life when I put this Albert Street sewer in out here. That storm sewer up through that 42-inch sewer I put up through there, I was $40,000 low on that job.
Mm-hmm.
Now that makes you kind of think.
Did you make out all right?
So, well, the bonding company comes in and looks, "Oh, you're $40,000 low on this." But that's where supervision comes in. You got to know what you're doing, and I'll tell you what I did. I put there's a 20-foot cut up there. You're 8 feet below the sanitary sewer, right along pretty close to it. I know what they did. They figured sheeting that. So what I did, I got everything organized, had to truck all that dirt away. I had dump trucks there. I'd throw that dump trucks full of dirt. They'd go and bring back a load of sand when they came back. We dumped that sand right here at the side of it. We had a loader right there. We dig out 8 feet. We wasn't very long putting in 8 feet of tile. Just as soon as we got that out of there, we'd shove that right back and compact it. We never had 1 minute's trouble. And that's where they figured the $40,000 worth of sheeting up there for several thousand feet there.
Uh-huh.
In order to hold that bank, they were afraid that sanitary sewer coming in there and caving in on them.
Mm-hmm.
But I tested the soil, so I thought I knew what I was doing. And bonding companies look at that, and they were a little bit hesitant to writing a bond for a $200,000 job.
Mm-hmm.
So I told him, I said, I want to tell you something. I said, if you want this bond, I'll just give you 5 minutes to write that bond. If you don't want it, you let me know, and I got another company that'll take it right now. And he got busy.
He took the bond.
Yeah, he took the bond, but he was kind of worried himself in being that much lower, and he thought there was something wrong with it, but I thought I had wound out so I could make it click going right up through there. Yeah. And it just worked like a clock works. I had no trouble. I'd take another in the same price.
Yeah. How about the family now? How about the kids? Children, I guess we should call them children.
I have 2 good daughters, and I have 2 good sons.
Yeah. When were the girls born, and what?
Well, they were born in the late 30s, both of them. They're only 16 months apart, both of them, and right around 37 or along in there. One of them is married to a Laporte boy, named of John Shum, and his background is he's a chemical engineer from Purdue, and he's had his master's in business from Indiana University. And my daughter is a dental hygienist from Indiana University. So
where do they live?
They live in Omaha. This is our second trip back to Omaha. He is head of Elanco out there. They make all the veterinarian medicine and subsidiary of Eli Lilly's.
Uh-huh.
So he's been with them ever since he went to work.
And the other daughter is?
The other daughter is.
I should ask you their names since we're.
Well, this is the first one is Josephine Gaunt, and she married a John Shum.
Mm-hmm. And the second
And
one?
the second one is Ann Gaunt, and she married Peter Strope. So Ann's went into the nursing field. She went to Michigan and started in physical therapy. And she changed her course after she started in school in Michigan, changed over to the nursing program. So after she saw that she'd made a mistake, she thought maybe she was going after she didn't think she wanted the therapy as bad as she did, so she changed over to the nursing. So they talked her into going to Indiana University. She went up there her first semester and had to change her course a lot too and make up a lot of stuff. A lot of subjects rather, and so we took her down to Indiana University at midterm because she had to have a year on campus before she went to medical center. So after 1 year was up, she took some summer school over at Kokomo and then worked in the office for me out there, bookkeeping for the Wabash materials in the summertime, and went to school in the afternoons and evenings over at Extension over at Kokomo. Mm-hmm. So she graduated there, then she left and went, and she got married, and they went, my son-in-law was a GMI student, where you go to school half-time and you go work half-time. And he graduated about the same time, and she had met him down in Indianapolis, so they got married. My oldest daughter got married in 1959, and the other daughter got married in 1961. So when they got married, she went to Lafayette, and he went for 2 masters down there. He's in school down at Purdue in engineering and some things that he wanted. He was thought about teaching at one time. He is a born teacher, but he didn't seem to want to stay with teaching, so she was night supervisor down there at the home hospital. So she helped put him through school down there. Then he had the 6 months, then Corning, New York came along, glass company at Corning, New York came along and hired him for a New York job up there, Corning, New York. So he had 6 months to do in the Army at that time. So he went down to Fort Benjamin Harrison. Not Fort Benjamin, he went down Louisville down there. Oh.
At Louisville?
Yeah, Louisville. I can't tell you the name.
Fort Campbell?
No, it's right there off the right side of it. That don't make any difference, but he went down there, and she came home here and was night supervisor at the hospital here for 6 months while he was down there in camp training. Uh-huh. And so when they came back, well, then they went to Corning, New York. Well, she got a job at teaching on the staff at Elmira, in the hospital over there, in the nursing program. So here she had her BS degree, and he went into the Corning factory there, and they put him on these televisions. They were having trouble with the colored television sets, making those tubes for them. Oh. So they put him on that, and he worked on that for all the time he was over there. And he's a boy that does not like to be set on just one thing. He likes to have a little broader mind than just one operation. So he didn't like that too well, so he came back to Cleveland. And while they were there, she taught in this class over there, and they told her that they didn't hire anybody without a master's. So she commenced thinking about getting her master's. So when they got back to Cleveland, he went to another job there in a machine shop, and then later transferred over to the American. He is now chief engineer for the American Greeting Card Company in Cleveland.
And that's where they live now?
Yeah, that's where they live now, and he's been putting up he has charge of laying out the machinery and selecting the machinery to put in these factories and updating machinery and things like that. That's what his job mostly is. So now she went on and got her master's there. Now she is director of nursing at Cuyahoga College in Cleveland. Or not Cleveland, it's Parma. That's just right. You would know the place. It's right tied on to Cleveland. So she has that program there, and we kind of wondered. She had a chance to stay on as as a teacher in Western Reserve, which is a good school over there. Western Reserve and Case of United. So that's she had a chance to stay on the staff there. We thought she was rather foolish, but we never interfered. She took this job out there in an old barracks building, and this barracks building is it's really old. They had it for World War II. It was a hospital there. Oh my, what's she going out there for? No streets and wait around the mud and what have you. But after she's been there 2 years, she transferred over into a $33 million college she's in now. All brand new. She knew that was coming on, and with this nursing program there at Cuyahoga College for, I'd say, around 3 or 4 years. It's a school where you go different ages. She has some that are younger, some that are older. People that have lost their, women that have lost their husbands want something to do. They like to work in a hospital and know something about nursing, so she has this program there. And we were quite amazed. Some of them are up 50 years old. See, in that
Starting
class.
all over.
And she had 5 male nurses in that class. She has about 85 nurses. And so when she started there, the hospitals didn't use her nurses. So now she has her program ironed out. She's an organizer. Her program is ironed out so that she has her nurses working in those hospitals, and they're tickled to death to get them. Now, she is not satisfied where she is. She is, for the last year and a half, she's been working on her doctorate in higher education. So she is always was pretty much a competitor, and she loves in the field of nursing. And I thought one good thing of all these nurses. Now there are people, let's face it, that want to learn, and when you have people like that, you have a good program. They're not up there just to spend time and get through by just trying to get through hook or crook.
Right.
So I haven't talked to her lately, but her first 2 years up there, I think she'd only had 3 that failed the state boards out of about 160 nurses. So I thought that was a pretty good record.
Good recommendation.
And this is quite some college up there. We haven't seen it since it's all been completed, but we were in up there. And she laid out a lot of it to suit herself in this nursing program up there.
What were the girls like when they were young? When they were growing up?
Well, they seem to be different. My oldest daughter she wasn't the scholar that the youngest one was. She had to work for everything she got, but she was this happens to a lot of people, and it happened to her. She was in a class, I think, of one of the smartest classes that ever graduated out of Wabash High School. There was a Squire's girl, and a Wilkie girl, John Koenig, and the Wimberley boy, and let's see, Dinah Boyson, and Milner girl, and she ran around with all those girls. And you know, when she had trouble keeping up in grades, and she really worked, and she made the honor roll, but she had to work for it. And she was a girl that never cared to do much housework.
Mm-hmm.
The younger girl was the one that did the housework. And now since they're married, they've just turned about. The youngest one is the career girl, that's Ann,
Mm-hmm.
and Jody is the housewife. She has 2 boys and a girl, and she's a good mother. And so the other daughter has a boy and a girl, and she puts those in private school. I think she's just a little bit afraid to put them in school up there around Cleveland. She'd rather have them in private school, and they go to Montessori. So that's where they are now.
How is your health all these years?
Well,
You're in a tough business.
I have been in good health up till it's been a business that ordinary people, it could bother them a lot. But to me, I could go home and forget it at night. I could go to sleep. I never had any trouble sleeping. And that's, a lot of them got ulcers from the contracting business. But I never did. I've made mistakes and made a lot of them. But you don't have to make it the second time. You can profit by your mistakes, and that's what I try to do, and I always try to keep things organized. But I officiated basketball and football, and I stayed in awfully good condition. You don't get out and run up and down the floor as an official. And I was the type of official, I didn't stand out there and just watch them. I had to play the game in order to be on my toes and be able to call them as is. And when you call them, you had to call them right now. You couldn't go in the conference and ask somebody else's opinion. You had to call them. But I knew my rules, and I worked hard at it. I'd drive to Fort Wayne every Monday night to a conference up there. We had an association, and we'd all talk about rules and things that came up, and I really enjoyed it. I got so that my schedule was made up of pretty good ball games. And I worked all over the state of Indiana. I went up to western state of Kalamazoo, worked some games up there. Worked for all the secondary colleges in the state, almost. And later on was asked why I didn't put my application in for the Big Ten. I was working with Sammy Vinehoff one night over at Marion. And he said, why in the world haven't you had your application in the Big Ten? I said, Sammy, had it been 5 years sooner, I would have, but I'm just getting ready to retire. I think 23 years is enough. And then after that, I tried to taper off, working a few games on down. And so finally, I ran into a little trouble in my last years of officiating. That was in the early 50s. I had a non-functioning gallbladder. And I had that examined by Mayo's Clinic, and Dr. Whistler here in town examined me. And then I went down to Indianapolis down there. I had a doctor I'd hunted with down there, Dr. Clark. And I'd gone up in Dakotas hunting with several times. Hard Horman was a good friend of Hard Horman's. He managed his farm for him. So he wanted me to come down. He took a lot of pictures of me. He didn't think there was anything wrong. And then I went to Mayo's. They finally discovered up there I had a non-functioning gallbladder, and I had to have it out. So I went back and had that out. And then 2 years ago, I had a heart attack. And I think that was, just one of those things that you run up against. I had too much water on my lungs, and I was
just age, just the natural
age you get, and
aging process.
I thought it was a cold, and it wasn't. It was water on my lungs, and so I got that taken care of, and I haven't had any trouble since.
Yeah. Well, you've always, at least for the years I've known, you've always been fairly trim and slim.
Yeah.
And
well, I've lost 25 pounds. They've taken me down 25 pounds since I had this heart trouble. Yeah. And I'm down around 160 pounds now. And last fall, I went up, Dr. Lee up at Fort Wayne. I got an artificial hip joint here. Took that out and put it in. So now I think I'm
98%.
I'm getting back in pretty good shape, and I can get out and go all day, and that's why I'm figuring on going up and helping my daughter for a couple of weeks up in Cleveland and get her house straightened around and some additions put on, and then I'm going to go. I've just told my son-in-law we're going to go hunting again this fall out in Iowa. I've never hunted in Iowa, so I used to hunt in Nebraska and hunt in Dakotas and Indiana, but I've never hunted in Iowa. So this year we're making plans to go hunting out there.
Were you, Lawarence, these are rather personal questions now. How about your religious affiliation? Were you active in the church? Or?
Well, I have been this way. I was
I remember
baptized.
you're going to talk to your great-grandchildren here.
I was baptized a Methodist.
Uh-huh.
Went to the Methodist church over on the south side. My wife was a Congregationalist. So when we got married, there was no Congregational church here. There was a Methodist church. And I said to her, I said, well, no, I'm not married to any one church. Let's just tour the churches of Wabash and see which one we want to belong to. That's just what we did. We went to all of them. And we ended up in the Presbyterian church. And I've been on the deacons of the Presbyterian church for several years. And then later on became a trustee. I have been on the board of trustees quite a number of times. I've been president of the trustees and been president of the deacons. And so we joined the Presbyterian church in 1929. We've been there ever since. Now we go to church down in Florida when we're down there to a interdenominational church. We have 27 different denominations in that church. We have 2 good preachers, both have their doctorate. And they are very good, and we enjoy them very much. And so that's where we go to church in Florida. We go quite often down there. And then we're back here in the summertime, and we go here in the summertime. I was back in the days, when we first went in church, was back in the days of Reverend Schaff in there, and then LeMailey. They were just about the time the change came in there. That's when I went to church. I've been on the board of trustees over there and been through a lot of remodeling, and I put the addition on the back of the church. I've remodeled that church so many times over there, it's hard to think of all of them, but I can remember putting that back structure on there for, I think it was $11,000.
You wouldn't get much now.
Try to put it on there today for that.
Yeah. Well, what philosophy or what would you tell your grandchildren, really, if you had some message for them?
I have often thought. I've sat down and I've told my wife this many times. I've sat down and wondered if somebody would ask me what kind of business to get in. That's a pretty big question. Just what kind of a business would you go in today if you were going to go into business? Of course, a lot depends on the personality of the person, but I'm faced with that right now, and I have a grandson that year after next will be in college, and I think he's now preparing himself to go in for dentistry. But to get somebody to know what they got to fit into something, and they got to be something they like. It's like me. I could have made a failure out of my life if I'd have jostled around. I tried several different things. I went in the container corporation down here, worked in their coating paper, and then I went from there over to the foundry business. They want somebody to look after the peacemakers and things like that down in the foundry. Everything I picked up was dirty, and my office was dirty, and I couldn't keep it clean, and I wasn't satisfied with that. I wanted something different, and I wanted outside. And that's it all depends on the individual to tell them what to do, but I would hate, like the Dickens, to tell, and you got to be pretty close to somebody to recommend what kind of a job for them to get into. And that's a big question today. Which they're qualified for. Our girls were pretty much known what they wanted when they were young and in high school. They were all set up, although they made a few mistakes and the girls had to pick up some things that they needed. They weren't guided just right in high school. And they had to change their schooling around a little bit in order to get some things that they needed to be a dental hygienist. And now, I tell you how that happened. I have a cousin, Jimmy Pearson, passed away several years ago, that took my oldest girl. He took her right in the dentist's office with him. She helped him make bridge work and false teeth, and he'd go out to the shop out there, and she'd work right along with him out there, and he just took her under his wing and made her what she was in the dental business. You got to give him credit for that, and I got to give Dr. Whistler credit for my aunt. She wanted to always. They kind of talked her into being a nurse. There wasn't any better background than to have her go into the nursing field, because that suited both the wife and I very much, to have her join the nursing profession.
Of course, you and Doc were old referees
Doc
together.
and I were old referees together. We were very close friends. And although we didn't have the same politics, well, we always got along. And he was quite a person, but he was one good old family doctor. We missed a good doctor when we lost him. I know he would come up to the house to see my wife about something, and that daughter of mine would take his bag, and she went all through that, and she wanted to know what this was for and what he used that for, and that was part of her education. And so he's been wonderful to my daughter Ann, or to our daughter rather. He's been wonderful to her, and Nancy was a nurse too, and she was a big help to her.
Wow.
And so that's got her started in the nursing field, and she's been going ever since, and still going to school. And it's a nice profession, and there's always a place for a nurse.
Did you ever think you'd live this long?
Well,
That's a funny
no.
question.
I'll be 74 my next birthday, and I just never gave it too much. I don't know. I have no reason to believe otherwise, because I still get out and work. I was out there in that orange sun the other day, putting in water line into the magnetics building right on the job, right out there where the sun got the full shot at me. And go out there and put in 8 hours a day. But I love it. I'm feeling good, and I see no reason to do different until, I can notice if I'm slowing down. I slow down a little bit. I'll go home and lie down in the afternoon for a little while and just kind of rest and take it easy. And so that's just about the way I feel about it. I have no idea how long I'm going to live. No one knows that but the good Lord, I guess. And
True. Very true.
when my time comes, why, I've been happy. I've had a good life.
Is there anything you'd like to put on the tape that would be for future generations, or?
Well, I love to work with the young people, and always have as long as I could. And I think you learn to know people when you officiate basketball games and football games. Not only do you know the kids, but you know the fans. And fans are always get out of kilter, And I've always been able to take care of myself with them. And I never run away from anybody. If I had somebody kind of razz me about a call I'd make, if there was an open seat there and I had a chance, I'd go and sit down and talk to him. I was always able to take care of myself. And I got into I love to officiate, and that's one thing that'll bring the good out of you, I'll tell you that. Is go out there and keep boys that are keyed up to the seventh heaven. And I'll just, for one instance, I was working a sectional down at Frankfurt one day. This Vaughn that played with UCLA, All-American. I was working a game when he got about 4 front teeth knocked out by just a boy, but the coach had him keyed so high that he just hauled back and hit him right in the face and just knocked all those front teeth out. And I just think those are things that I was against. And I've seen a time when I've called all the boys in together after the coach had called time out to get on them and get them all keyed up for the last few minutes of the ball game. And then when they got them keyed up, well, I done key them when they got out on the middle floor. I said, now, you know that bench is over there. There's plenty of places over there for the boys that don't want to play basketball. As long as you want to play, I'll play right along with you. And I never had very much trouble with the boys. And a lot of officials did because they let people run them. But I've always enjoyed it. I guess when you work games like Marion Kokomo, Marion Frankfurt, when I used to go down and work the Jeff Frankfurt game. Jeff Frankfurt game was one of them, and then I'd go down and work the Jeff and West Side Lafayette, two schools right there in one town. And I worked a lot of the City Series games. I worked 3 sectionals in Fort Wayne. But it's just been a wonderful life. And how we ever got mixed up with school teachers, I don't know. But we always have been. We always have a reunion with school teachers every year. That's the SQs, Miss Trucks, and Laven Goods. She was the teacher and taught out here for quite a while. The Russ Arndt from Mishawaka, he's passed away. And the Lawarence from Mishawaka, awful good friends. He did some officiating and taught in the school up there. He was running the shop up there. But somehow or other, we've been always affiliated with school teachers.
Maybe you were a frustrated school teacher.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. We just seem to run into it. Yeah. And I'll tell you this one instance, and then I'll quiet down here. My daughter, when she was a hygienist, went into, they had to give these treatments to the school down in Crawfordsville. One of the principals, she walked in his office one of the days, and they had their name. They introduced themselves to him. And she said, my name is Jody Gaunt. He said, would you by any chance be Larry Gaunt's daughter? She said, yes, I am. So that kind of made her day for her. To think that somebody would recognize her out of those girls down there giving these treatments to the school kids down there.
Great. Well, I think that we've covered just about everything, haven't we?
I think we've pretty much, most of my life here in Wabash, and maybe my grandkids can listen to that someday, which would be nice.
I hope so.
I think my daughters would like to hear it sometime when they're back in town.
What we do is, what the library does is type this up, send you a copy, you correct it for family names and so forth, and then we keep it in the library here, and we also keep the tape, so it's
That's good. Well,
but it's been a very pleasant afternoon, and thank you very much.
I enjoyed it.
Good.
Little do you think we've talked here for a couple hours.
2 hours. And this is George Dingledy, Wabash Carnegie Public Library.